So guys, the next part's going to focus on hooking up our new team form. And here I'm showing localhost 3000/teams.new. And right now it only has the name field. And we originally created nested attributes for the users field in this case. So I need to extend this quite a bit. And I'm going to use Vue.js just to make this a little more intuitive and, I don't know, modern in a sense. It's also an excuse to learn Vue.js a bit more, which is what I'm after, because I'm kind of seeing it as maybe an alternative to jQuery in some cases. Just some of the technology behind JavaScript today is just gaining a lot of traction and a lot of people are loving it. So what better way to use it than to just start using it inside a Rails project and to get it mainly where I see it being more user-friendly in my past is like when you're filling out forms and stuff like that, you don't have to wait for a browser to push something to a server. You know, it's rather reactive in real time. So that's kind of what I'm trying to convey in this part of this series and part of this video. We're going to use the old school way of, here's that form that we used initially in a previous series where you would submit data, it would be pushed to the server. That's just kind of how Rails is out of the box. So that data gets propagated, gets saved to a database, and then it gets spit back out however you plug it in. In our case, we want to kind of use JavaScript and some JSON kind of approaches just to render this stuff a little more interactively. I don't know how to best describe it, but I'm going to start in the new view and kind of just build up our template to make it look a lot better than it does. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to just only keep rendered form there, the partial. This right here is rendering this partial in the teams folder, if you're not sure. And we're passing in the team variable from our view to it through the controller. So that's just how those things tie together. I'm going to start with a section from Bulma just to give us some room here. All right, so within this is where it gets kind of tricky and it won't seem like something you just think up. But we have a content tab and we're going to first, you can actually render a type of tag with Rails. So that's kind of cool to start with. But in this tag, we want to do some data attributes, which you can render as well. So we can comma separate those, and I'm going to just kind of do so like this, team form. And I should say I cannot credit myself to all of this code. The founder of GoRails.com has a pretty cool tutorial on how to use Vue.js with Ruby on Rails. I just took his example and kind of ran with it though. I can't vouch for his work or he can't vouch for this, but it's just more of just saying, hey, thanks, for sharing that. If he's watching, it definitely helped me, and I hope it'll help you guys too. So I'm just paying it forward, hopefully. Not trying to steal by any means. Okay, I should be explaining this. So we're passing in data attributes to a div. So this would normally look like, I don't know, like div, data, and then ID equals, I don't know, 1, and then data team equals, some other stuff. So that's what you're seeing there, and this is just generating it with Rails, but we're passing it as JSON in this case. So we want it to pass everything through, but we can say what it shouldn't pass through. And in this case, we only want the ID. We don't want these actually created at and updated at. So once I get this div made, we can view it in the view and see if anything pulls back. Attributes. Here we're getting attributes, those nested attributes. These are what these are. And so we're getting team.users to JSON. And this took me a while to wrap my head around because I was trying to understand Vue alongside of this and it just wasn't clicking. Like I said, this one took me quite the longest to do. So that probably explains the delay if you're just now seeing this on YouTube. Great, so that basically creates a div, and we want to loop through using a block in this sense. So I already ended it. There we go. So below everything else, I'm going to do an end. So with Vue, you have to attach it to something to initialize it. And in this case, I'm attaching it to our ID of team form. We haven't touched any JavaScript yet, so I will get into that in a second. I'm just trying to get our template up to spec because it's going to look stupid otherwise. So let me get some code on the page, and then we'll go to our JavaScript. Okay, guys, so on our new.html.erb inside our teams folder, we have this markups to start. There's going to be more attributes that we're going to add that hook into Vue when we start rendering stuff. Going further, I want to go into our partial next and add stuff to that one. And at the moment, it looks like this. It's going to be quite a bit longer because we're going to have nested attributes. I'll start with a kind of bare bones look to it, but then I'm going to add a bunch of Vue stuff to make it really interactive, so we can do things as we interact with the form itself. So you'll see what I mean as we approach, the time to adding the JavaScript. But right now I'm just getting the foundation laid. So right now I'm just going to delete everything and then start adding some markup. So fast forward through this if you want. I'll probably kind of speed it up, maybe at least at a manageable rate, so you can copy if you need to. All right, guys, so we have our basic markup here. We're going to need more to make this look like it should, but I need to introduce Vue to make it kind of work the way I'm thinking. So let's go and make sure first our columns and stuff are set up right. This will end up on the right side, this stuff. So let me go find that in our new file. Just to verify I have this set up right. Column is 5. We got the form there. Yeah, so I need a columns tag, which I don't believe I have. I think I removed them because I have styling added to these, so I fixated those actual blocks. They're positioned like fixed, and they're added based on Vue. So we'll get into that very next. So let's go ahead and start. So the first thing we need to do, I have the views pretty much set up. They look like this. And by default, I basically don't want this form to display. The same with this until someone enters a team. it'd be cool if once the user enters a team, it would update over here. You could see what you're typing in real time. Same is true for the users' names and email. And then this, if it got really long, I'd love it to just kind of scroll and fixate itself on the right side over here, and just be a little more interactive with the user as opposed to just being a flat form that just posts to some database somewhere. So this will still do that, but it'll be kind of stuff behind the scenes that takes place. So my theme new file is pretty much complete. We will be adding stuff in here that's going to be Vue related. The same is true for this form partial, so I'll be sprinkling that stuff in as we go. So I'm going to redirect to this JavaScript folder in our app, which I talked about at the very beginning. Inside the packs folder is where we're going to have our project set up. There's a default one that's just there. You don't have to really worry about it, but I do need to add a JavaScript Pack Tag to our application. I'm going to actually create a new file that's called the name of our project. This can be whatever you want it to be, really. And don't think of Vue as a complete framework, so you can sprinkle it into your app wherever you want it, and each of these files could be their own component, or you can make Vue components with a Vue extension here. You'll see there's a template that gets rendered, and then the actual scripts that do stuff, and then you can actually scope styles to the component. So think of it as just pieces that get put into the different app wherever you want, In my case, I'm just using it on this form, so I don't really need to componentize too badly. So I'm going to create my file. I need to make sure it's added to our application file. So if I go to application layouts, make sure I commented out before. So let's go ahead and uncomment that, save it. One thing I should note that because we have Webpack in our project now, we need to run yet another tab, and inside our project run Webpack dev server. And if all goes right, this should basically build the files as we make changes, and it'll watch for those. So here we have all of our stuff. It sees those files, it sees the hello Vue file, all that stuff. It basically does all these optimizations to it, and who knows what. There's so much stuff going on, it's crazy. But you can see the server on a different host if you want to. It's completely up to you if you want to see it auto refresh. I already have Guard installed, so it's not that big of a concern to me, but if you want to, I think this is the localhost path. If that doesn't work, you might read the docs. So it's called Webpacker, the gem. And in fact, I could probably just verify if it works real quick. And yeah, it's the error, so it's because we haven't really done anything yet, I think. Okay, so I have project in our app file here. I need to basically begin by importing a few resources that we might use. Really don't need this file. In fact, I think I deleted it from my demo project, so I'm going to start there again. Delete that. That file is useful though if you want to get started with this. It's kind of just a hello world example. So first we want to import Vue. This is all JavaScript now, so. And I've added this stuff when I added the Webpacker gem, but also I added a yarn package in a few videos back that you'll need to reference. If you haven't or didn't see that part, maybe go back and double check. It's called Vue resource though. So if you just do a yarn add, wherever it is, yarn add, I need a new tab. Let me open a new tab. It would be yarn add Vue resource, which I already have, so I don't need to install it, but if you do, that's what you would type. And it looks like I have an error in my build process, and I think it's looking for something. I think I spelled from wrong. Yeah, it should be form. Okay, and then we want that view resource module. So just view resource for this one. Okay. And I'm not an expert with Vue yet, so some of this is still new to me, but I'm just kind of following along. Like I said, the creator of Go Rails did a kind of his own tutorial. I think his name is Chris Oliver, so shout out to him. Did a really good job explaining this. I'm definitely using some of the code from it, but I'm also like adding things to it that are help make our app a little more interactive. So the first thing we want to do is add an event listener to make sure our app plays nicely with TurboLinks, which is installed by default on most Rails apps. And you could do that by typing this, and then we can do an arrow function. This is ES6 stuff, and we're able to use it because we're using Webpack. It kind of bundles it all up and makes sure everything's performant for our browsers that can't display ES6. And I think we don't even need semicolons and this stuff, which is crazy to me, but it's pretty cool regardless. It cleans it up dramatically. So if you're used to Ruby, there's really no semicolons, so it's kind of nice. So the first thing is I'm saying view use view resource. It should be use, not user. So we're initializing that off the bat. And then we need to establish some headers, and we're using a HTTP service through view resource. So this, if you look up view resource on the web, it's kind of just like a way to get stuff and push stuff or post stuff via HTTP. So there's all this get, post, and response, more or less another version of like promises, and or what is it called, fetch. Yeah, it's its own library. Or Axios is kind of a newer one that's out. I haven't had much experience with any of them, to be honest, so it's just kind of a but I'm trying to see where my stuff is compiling here, and it shouldn't. I think I need to delete this. Is it referencing? Do I have it in my app? It's giving me an error saying I still have that old application file. I don't think I need it or should have it. I'm just gonna roll with it for now. I think it's just because I haven't completed this. This will be using view resource. We're gonna do this crazy string here of stuff that basically is doing some checks on our forms and hooking into Rails so it plays nicely together. And we need it to find the meta tag on our application, which has a name of CRSF token or CSRF token. And we want the attribute, basically the content of that. Content. Okay, so that's probably the most ganky looking line you'll have to write so far, but we'll keep going. So I want to find our form and basically just call it var element, and we'll find it by the ID. So document.get ID, or get element by ID, and then pass in team form. And I'm getting this because by default Rails gives us this ID on that form. If we were to go to the form, see, it's still saying documents, JavaScript packs, no such file. I wonder why it does that. I'm curious. It's something I'm not aware of. All right. So I guess I spoke too soon when I said I didn't have views, or I already had view resource installed. didn't have it installed, was getting errors. If you're getting the same, make sure it's installed. So that's how we were able to use these HTTP gets and stuff in this file. Headers, crap. Anyway, so I'm getting my form with the ID of team form, and that's literally given to it by default from Rails, which is handy. So I'm going to inspect the element on it just to prove it. Let me put this back down, dock it, and here's team form. So it's usually prefixed with your model name and then form with a hyphen. Cool, that's straightforward. And you notice the data attributes we added in our new view are showing up too, since we created that div with the data ID and the team and the user attributes on it. So it's pretty nifty. Okay, so with that said, we have a form created. We need to first make sure the form exists. So let's go element. Make sure it exists. Obviously, it should if we're getting the ID, but we also want to make sure it's not empty to begin with. So we can start here, and I'm going to create some variables. The first is going to be the ID, which is element.dataset.id. The data set is the data attributes, so it's like all of them on the div we created. Var team equals JSON parse. So we're parsing the forms data set, which is of the team data, so that if you want to double check, we have this team data attribute there. So it'd be data team in the HTML. So we're getting that. And then we want the same for the user attributes. And we want JSON back because we can actually send that over the browser through a post method or something like that with JSON. Dataset.user attributes. And this is going to be camel cased. And make sure it's users. And Rails will be smart enough to know, or JavaScript should know, that this will end up being hyphened. And then we need to take user attributes. And then for each of those, create a function and pass in the user. So we'll be getting back every user that's generated in this form, and set destroy to null. So just saying, hey, it's not destroyed. And team.user, I already messed this up. It should be users here. Attributes equals users attributes. Okay, great. So that gets us all the data through the ID we were looking for. So next we can basically initialize our View app by saying var app equals new view, and then pass in some stuff. So the element we're going to focus on is our element, which we established up here, which points to our team form. So that's where this View app will start. And then we can throw back some data. So this gets returned to the view. So we'll return this stuff. This is the stuff that'll display basically on the front end as we iterate through it. So team, errors, which I have added. Just kind of a check for when there is an error, I'm feeding it back the JSON. And then I have a scroll position that I'd like to set once the form gets too long. I want some stuff to kind of append and modify itself around it. Okay, I'll just go down the line. There's quite a few functions we can add to this Vue instance, which is part of how a Vue app works. So to start, I have one called mounted, and it starts like this. So as the app initializes, this stuff fires, and there's a bunch of different methods you can use similar to this that, like, say the app dismounts, if it mounts, if it changes, does all this stuff. You can do different things. It's pretty neat. So I'm just looking for a scroll event. So we'll do this update scroll. And then we're referencing a method here. So I'm going to define that below. And this is built into Vue. You can create an object on the Vue app called methods and then pass in methods. So update scroll will be this. This is referencing the ID or the element of the Vue instance here. So this scroll position equals window.scrollY. And then I have another one called add user. So we'll have that add users form below. This will probably error out that I'm looking at it. So this is that form, and I want that to not show by default when the user enters this page. When they click add a user, this will propagate, and then those fields will display. And then you can continuously click add user to add another user. So this is what's going on there. Let me create a function. So this .team .users attributes. We're going to append these. Basically, when we click that add user button, we want each parameter of that form, that nested form, to reset itself. So the name needs to be an empty string, the ID needs to be null, the email needs to be empty, and destroy needs to be null. Story. Did I misspell that above? Yep. Okay, so that takes care of that one already, which is nice. And you can comma separate all these methods. So inside of this, we can do a remove user. And inside our view, we can call these methods. That's what's so cool about this. So your view can interact with your JavaScript like almost directly. It's pretty crazy. So we need a user, and we can get that by this team.users attributes index. So we're going to iterate through some users. So if user ID is equal to null, do this team.users attributes .splice index in 1 by 1, else this team.users attributes destroy equals 1. So here we're just kind of toggling. If it's set to 1, it's true. If it's not, it's false. So that's basically saying if it's 1, destroy it, and we'll set it to 1. You'll see. The view explains it a little more. So undo remove. This is kind of just a handy nice to have. I don't know that I implemented it, but I'm going to add it here. Index .team.users attributes index _ destroy equals null. And then finally save team, which is kind of the bigger bear of the group here. We just want a function. So this just creates a new team, and we want to check first if this ID is equal to null. If it is, we'll do this $HTTP post, and we want to go straight to the teams path. So we can actually queue that in directly and then pass in our object, or basically our team ID that we need, that Rails will understand. So this.team will pass in that ID. And then when that gets passed, we can do it then, kind of creates that promise in JavaScript. Response. You could do the arrow function here. Since we're using TurboLinks, we can go ahead and do a turbolinks.visit teams, and then we need to actually use backticks here. So backtick, this allows us to add basically little placeholders here to our code, so we don't have to do a bunch of plus signs or anything. ID. Okay, and then on that response, we need a comma there, and we can do another response. Another arrow key. We can console.log that just for fun. Definitely remove this if you're wanting to make it legit. So here I'm adding, if there is an error, I'm doing a little bit of error checking on the front end, so I want that error message to display out the front. So we can do if response status equals 422, do this. So what I ended up doing is just getting some JSON and parsing it. So in this response comes back quite a bit of stuff, and you can grab it if you want. So response.body text is one of those things. And I can take this errors and do JSON user's email, and then get the first message out of that array. So this error thing here is what gets actually input to our view, and that's because we're returning it here. The same is true for this, the team, and the ID. So we can get all those things and return them to the view. It's kind of closed in that sense. It's kind of nice. Okay, so that part's done. We can do an else now. If we want to edit existing team. So if you don't save it, you can do an else. Oops. We'll take this dot http dot put teams, pass in this. This needs to be backticks too. Oops, I need to do this ID, and then we can comma separate that. It'll be team, this dot team again, so the ID again, and then we can do it then response, kind of the same damn thing we just did, but I'm just typing it out. So actually I want this. Turbolinks.visit. I'm going to just honestly copy this right here. And then the response again. So we have those, and then we could comma separate this, and then if there's an existing team, do a function return this team.id is not equal to null. Okay, so that was a lot. And it's understandable if you don't quite understand it, because I can't quite understand it completely myself, but it's okay. The big difference here with save and edit is put and post. So post goes and stores it, where put, finds the ID and puts it. So if you're editing, you can go ahead and do that and still save it after you edited it. So great. So I think we're set. I'm gonna give it a once over here real quick, and then we'll move on in the next video.